Hello and welcome to our next video about the interview process. In this video, we'll talk about what a typical interview process will look like, what are the different stages of the interview, whom to expect in the interview, and what kind of questions you can expect, and also the points to remember, like as part of preparation or as part of answering the questions, what you need to keep in mind when you go for an interview. Those kind of things we'll talk about. Let's start. What are different rounds or stages in an interview? Especially when you go for a direct client interview, you can expect a coding test followed by a telephonic or a video call, and then finally an in-person interview. These are typical stages for a direct client interview, but it can slightly differ based upon what is the client or company you are having the interview. It can be a round less or it can be a couple of rounds more. It all depends based upon the company. But this is in general for a direct client interview. First, there will be a coding test. As part of coding test, you can expect to receive an online test or an offline test. As part of an online test, you will be sent a link to hackerrank.com or some other website where you need to log in and complete the online test. Online tests typically have time limit. That is, when you log in and start the test, you need to finish it within a stipulated time. Or you may receive an offline test. Offline test can simply be a question that is sent in the email. Or it can be a program in GitHub. You need to clone the project or program from GitHub. You need to solve the particular coding test and you need to commit back to the GitHub. Whichever way, once you finish your online or offline test, the results will be sent to the hiring manager or the team, and they will decide whether to call you to the next round or not. And as part of this coding test, Java is the king of object-oriented programming languages, and most oftentimes I see that interviewers expect the candidates to solve the given coding question using Java. Most coding questions need a suitable data structure in order to solve them. When you get a coding question, you need to understand the coding question, and typically each coding question needs a specific or suitable data structure in order to get it solved. For instance, if you get a question like find the duplicates in a given string, etc., you need to use set interface implementation in Java like hash set, etc. Or suppose you get a question to store the key value pairs, you need to use the map interface in Java, the implementation classes like hash map, etc. Anyway, you need to figure that out based upon the question, but remember that most of the time coding questions involve a data structure and you need to use the right data structure. If you clear the coding test, you will be scheduled for a telephonic or a video call. This call is usually by the hiring manager. Hiring manager is generally the QA manager or head of QA, whoever is hiring you into their team. And typically a telephonic interview will last like 30 minutes. It can go beyond 30 minutes, but expect some high-level questions in this telephonic interview. He or she might ask you what kind of testing you did, like front-end testing or back-end testing or database testing or performance testing, those kind of things. At a high level, they try to understand what are the different areas you have exposure to and what are the different tools and technologies you have used as part of your experience so far, and try to figure out your technical abilities and go from there. Sometimes it can be a video call where you are expected to share your video or share your screen. And during this kind of call as well, sometimes they might give you to solve a coding question. Hence, please be prepared to expect to solve a coding question as well as part of this round. Once you get through this, the final round and the very important round is the in-person round or face-to-face. When you go for the in-person interview, you expect to meet more folks from their team. The people you meet can be from the QA team, and sometimes there can be developers, DevOps, or product engineers, or the engineering managers. So expect to meet more people when you go for a face-to-face interview. It may not be like a panel, all of them sitting together and interviewing you, but typically they come one at a time to focus on different areas of your technical skills. Anyway, that's the typical stages in a direct client interview. Next, to talk about whom and what to expect in an interview, especially when you go for a face-to-face interview, you talk to different members of the team. As I was telling you, they may not all be QA, but generally these are typical people you talk to, like one of the senior automation members in the team and one of the functional QA in the team, and one of the release engineering team members or a release engineering manager. And finally, you will be talking to the hiring manager or QA head for that company or for that group you are getting hired to. They are the typical folks you talk to or who will be interviewing you. Let's begin with senior automation member, what he or she is going to expect from you. The senior automation member or the senior SDET typically tries to gauge your programming skills. Programming is one of the primary skills that you are expected to have for this kind of role. All other kind of skills are secondary. Programming is a primary skill. You need to showcase your technical and logical skills as part of impressing this particular automation member. Most of the time, the coding or logical questions can be around Java strings. You need to be really prepared with the string API in Java and expect to solve some of the answers. And also be prepared with the data structures or collections in Java, how you can solve specific scenario-based questions. And also you are expected to write some positive test cases and negative test cases to test your given program is really working or not. And then functional QA. Functional QA or manual QA, they are really well respected. They exactly know how the application or the workflow works from end to end. And typically a functional QA tries to understand what your coordination skills are. How you can, as an automation team member, can coordinate with the functional team or functional team members. Oftentimes you need to coordinate with functional QA to understand what to automate, what not to automate, which test cases are the priority, how to get the requirements, how to prioritize them. All these are important, and the functional QA in the interview tries to assess what are your coordination skills, what is your knowledge or background in the QA in the first place, those kind of things. Then you may be meeting with one of the release engineering team members or DevOps. You know that as part of Agile or Scrum methodology, you often need to coordinate with the release engineering in advance in getting the builds for the deployments, getting the approvals, following up, these kind of things they might focus on. Hence, the release engineering team member or the manager, whoever is interviewing you, they will try to understand, have you worked in a similar model, for example, Agile, and they're interested to know how often you were doing releases in your last project. The answer to that question really depends. When you are working in a company, you work with the different projects. Sometimes you do testing or automation of bug fixes that can be released as often as like every day. Or you might be testing or automating some pure development project that may be released every end of the sprint, like every 2 weeks. So the answer really depends. These kind of things they might focus on and interested to see how skilled you are to manage these kind of things. Finally, it is the hiring manager or the head of the QA for the company or for that particular group you are hired. The hiring manager typically tries to understand your skills with related to the design of the application or the test framework and the architecture of your last project or framework. Those kind of things they are really interested at a high level, how you could basically present them. Even you are expected to write the architecture of your last project on the whiteboard and explain them. They might ask you some specific scenario-based questions as well to answer at a high level. They might also see your communication skills, how well you are communicating or how well you are able to present your idea, those kind of things. Sometimes you may fail to answer some questions or you may or may not have worked on a specific tool or technology they might be using. But that is totally fine. What the hiring manager sees is if they can hire you as a long-term resource and over long term, can you really come up to the speed and contribute to the team or the project? That's all part of this slide, guys. Let's move on to the last slide. The points to remember. If we categorize all the questions that will be asked in the interviews, they can be categorized into 3 different sections generally. Technical questions, process-related questions, and managerial questions. All of them are really important. If you just prepare to answer the technical questions, you may or may not get through the interview. Hence, please be prepared for the process and managerial questions as well. If we begin with the technical questions, always try to provide real-world examples. If you have to tell the difference between an interface and a class, for instance, we were looking at the e-commerce and the payments related project, right? In the resume we were talking about in the last videos. One of the example can be a payment can be an interface, while the implementation classes can be like the Google Pay or Apple Pay or PayPal, for instance. And coming to the process related questions, you will talk to the product owner or the DevOps or the release management team. As I was telling you, you need to be really crystal clear about what is the Agile, Scrum or Sprint methodology you are following in the last project, and what is your release process and what are your release timelines. And if you are using Git repository, what is the Git branching and merging model you follow, how the code reviews are handled and approved and merged to the master branch. These are all like process related questions, and process related questions are also important in telling your experience or coordination across different teams, etc. Finally, managerial questions. Managerial questions, typically hiring manager or QA engineering manager will be asking you, or a HR in some companies. You should be prepared to answer, why did you choose this company? You cannot simply tell that you just randomly applied and you got an interview call, that's how you came. Unfortunately, you can't answer that way. You need to answer, how did you come across this company and why you are willing to join this company. You can answer like, the company has really good growth or good work culture, or you can see yourself in a given role after a few years down the line based upon how the company is doing or what their business is, those kind of things. And also, you need to be prepared to answer how you resolve issues with the team members. This is something that tells the manager or HR about your personality or character. This is also something important apart from your technical capabilities. Oftentimes, during the design presentations or code reviews, different team members come up with different ideas in order to design something, or as I was saying, to code review something. For this kind of questions, you need to answer that you always try to find a common ground and accept what is the best solution. Alright folks, we discussed a lot of things. These are really important to be prepared before you are going for the interviews. Hope this helps.